Growing up in South Florida in the 1960s, early 70s, not much was known about learning disabilities in those days. And I'll never forget just how frightening it would be to go to school each day. I tried not to go to school many days, but eventually I'd get into school and I'd sit there, and all I would want to do was get out. I would notice all the other kids seemed to find everything so easy, and reading was just so hard. And there's times when the teacher would ask me to go to the board and write something on the board, or we'd do oral reading exercises, and they go around the room asking each kid to read. I would be petrified. Um, Later, middle school was just as bad, and high school was even worse. I was just a miserable student. And the saddest part was when I'd go home, I never could make my parents proud. They would always be angry. My dad had nicknames for me. He was a retired Army colonel, and he just couldn't understand why his kid wasn't just doing better in school. He called me the mental. That was his nickname for me, and he'd say I had a piece missing. Well, I wish my dad could see me today, because what I've done over the last 25 or 30 years is change the lives of so many kids that were going through what I was going through. I didn't know anything about learning disabilities, nor did anyone else in South Florida in the 1960s or 70s, but really science doesn't progress in a nice linear way. Science goes through what they call phase changes. It's almost like a block of ice. A block of ice won't look much different when it's 17 degrees, 18 degrees, 19 degrees. As soon as it hits 32, something starts to happen. And at 33, boom, the block of ice makes a dramatic phase change to water. Well, that's how it seems to be with the understanding of learning disabilities. Until neuroimaging became so easily accessible by neuroscience in the last 10 or 15 years, no one really understood much about learning disabilities. They had a lot of theories, but now it's just so crystal clear. We don't have learning disabilities, we have teaching disabilities. Everyone learns differently, and everyone's neuroanatomical structure of their brain is not the same. But we have teachers teaching to one type of brain, and the saddest part is some brain styles are not conducive to being good readers. Prior to 1888, when the Industrial Revolution and the railroads came into being, if you wanted to learn a craft or a skill, you simply worked as an apprentice, learned everything you needed to learn about your craft or your skill or your vocation, and you became an expert. But with the invention of the printing press, all of a sudden educators believed that reading was the way to gain learning, and if you couldn't read well, you were blocked from learning. I do a lot of presentations all over the state and country, actually. And every time I start a session, I say, how many people here just are passionate and love to read? And maybe 30%, one-third of the group will say, oh, I love to read. And then you say, how many people just can deal with it, but they're not crazy about it? And you get about another third of the group. And I said, how many people think that the statement, I read for fun, is absolutely crazy? That makes no sense. And about a third of the people think it's crazy to read for fun, because their brains are not designed to be good readers. I was thinking just today, if someone wanted to be an opera singer, and you had, say, 10 people wanted to be opera singers, and you put those 10 people into training to be opera singers, no matter how much training you put them through, one-third would probably be pretty good, one-third would be mediocre, and one-third would be miserable opera singers, because not everyone has a neuroanatomical structure to be a good opera singer. But does that make the 30% that are not good opera singers stupid or disabled? That's crazy. But we do this with reading. There's parts of the human brain specifically dedicated to subspecialty abilities necessary to make it easy to read. Not all brains have those same anatomical structures as other brains, but yet reading becomes the key gateway methodology to gain learning. Anyway, I don't believe we have problems with kids having learning disabilities. We have problems with schools having teaching disabilities. Schools know how to teach to people that are good readers, and they neglect to address the educational needs of those who learn in other ways. I feel so empowered when I get to work with kids. And actually, I believe I've tested or been involved with the diagnostic process of more kids than any psychologist anywhere. Since 1988, coming up on 30 years, I have worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, with kids and families in both the private and public sector, working through the diagnostic process to identify why smart kids struggle in school. And every kid that didn't show motivation, didn't show an affinity for school, let down their parents with their grades, we clearly identified the reason why. Their brains were not designed to learn like other kids' brains. So I'm very proud of what we've done here. We have myself, possibly about 6 or 8 colleagues. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. We house interns and postdocs from local universities. And probably we see, as a group, 600 to 800 kids a year, and put them through the diagnostic process and develop a pathway through the jungle of learning to empower them to be more successful students. And when you have success in school, you have happiness, you have self-esteem, you have behavior improvement, you have attentional improvement, you have happier families. If you had to send your husband off to work each day, or your wife went off to work each day, and they just couldn't manage the task demands that their boss put on them at work, they'd have the luxury of quitting, or in some cases they'd be fired. But when we have a second grader who can't read, and he comes home and says, "Mom, I hate school, it's no fun," you know what the mom say? "Don't worry, you only have 10 years to go." That's what they're thinking. That's what actually they're saying by not saying, "Son or daughter, there must be a reason that you struggle in school. I know you're smart, so let's figure out the reason and create a pathway for success." So that's what I want to share about what drives us to do this is a passion for children and a passion for creating pathways for success. Because no kid that has average or better cognitive potential should ever struggle in school.